Hello, everyone, and welcome to 2025. And of course, projecting into the future regarding short-term rentals, Airbnb, Booking.com, VRBO. How do we take the insights of the biggest global short-term rental platforms out there, Airbnb, Booking.com, and VRBO, which is part of the Expedia group, and take their insights of the last year and to see what worked for global hosts and bring that into South Africa to see how we can improve our listings so we increase our occupancy, increase our daily rates, and of course, therefore increase our profits and yields. My name is Robin Booth. I invest heavily into Airbnb in South Africa, as well as student housing, multi-lets, normal buy-to-lets, as well as commercial and development. But for me, I'm passionate about the Airbnb model because it has opened up properties I could never have expected to buy and run if I was just using alternative strategies. So I'm so passionate about this. I took the last 3 earnings report transcripts of Airbnb, Booking.com, on VRBO, and I plowed through them to extract the insights that these global platforms are sharing with us as to how they generated the most money and the trends they are seeing on a global level, and how I can then interpret that and bring it in to integrate into my listings here in South Africa. And of course, I'm sharing that with you. And the article that I've written delves into that quite extensively, but there were certain parts of that article that I felt would be better for me to share on video here because it requires a little bit of a nuance and a greater depth of understanding, and this is what I've given to you today. There are 4 different components based on the article that I'm going to bring into this video, and they are: how do we get our pricing and competitive pricing right? So I'm going to share about that, the Airbnb wish lists. Also, we talk a lot about the Booking.com loyalty, in other words, the Genius program. How do I use that to filter out all those horrible guests that create havoc, damage, just don't like them? How do we create systems that create intense automation and streamline efficiency as soon as we start scaling? So I'm going to deal with that. And of course, what I see is the best and most efficient, productive way of differentiating yourself from your competition, because in the absence of value, people will default to price. So we're going to expand that as well. So let's just jump in. If you want to go and see the actual article and all insights and the statistics I give, please do go and look at that article. But for now, I'm going to share those 4 components. And of course, the most important one is pricing. How do we determine our pricing? And it is very clear that having a dynamic pricing model is going to increase your occupancy and bookings. Now, a dynamic pricing model does not mean you have to go and subscribe to these fancy programs out there that will automatically assess what's going on in your community, what the trends are, and adjust your pricing. You can do that yourself. The dynamic pricing model is really just saying that it is not a one-size-fits-all, same price throughout the year, which, believe it or not, some hosts still do. But we're not those kind of hosts. And if you are, please do change it to a model where you take into account the different seasons, perhaps weekends to weekdays, or perhaps even certain events that come around to you. So a dynamic pricing model implies variation, that it is dynamic. Sometimes you're going to go higher, sometimes lower. And that is really, really important. Now, besides the main pricing model, which will be seasonal, if you're Cape Town based, or you're on the coast, or you're significantly more vacation based, you need to tap into the high seasons of vacation and the lower seasons of vacation. Otherwise, consider things like weekends. Weekends might be higher if you're like 1 hour or 2 away from a major city and it's a weekend getaway compared to mid-stays. But what I'm sharing with you is one way in which you can also gauge your pricing against your highest competition. Because at the end of the day, if you are so dominant, then people are going to choose you. But if you've got so many other listings that are just like you or as good as you or are your competition, you should be identifying which ones those are. So in Airbnb, you can go and just have a general look to see who are the listings around you that you feel are your biggest competition that might be taking away your occupancy. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a wish list, an Airbnb wish list. So this you would do in the traveling mode, not as the hosting mode. Because in the traveling mode, this was designed where a group could see oh, we like that one, we like this one, we like that one. They share that listing amongst themselves, and the group can decide by voting which one they like and which one they don't. And it's so much easier to get an agreement in the group about which is where you want to go. But what I've done is I take my wish list and or my competition, I add them to a wish list. So for example, beachfront competition. So all those apartments around mine that I feel are my highest competition, I add them to that wish list category. And then if I go to that wish list and I enter in the dates, it will tell me out of that wish list which of those units are currently available and what their pricing is. So very quickly, I can see on specific days, what is my competition around me? Because if everyone else is booked up, it means I'm the only one left, which means I might have some leeway in what I can price for those days that is open. If I go and search on my wish list for those dates and all of my competition is also open, well, then I need to be more competitive in my pricing. So very quickly, this wish list function allows me just to identify on one page who my competition is at that time and what their pricing is, which allows me to go and just change my own pricing, hence very dynamic, to what my current biggest competition is doing, or if they're already booked up or not. So that's a significant tool for us to use. The next one, of course, is the comment that they say that a lot of these platforms are trying to get loyalty. They want, obviously, returning customers, and Airbnb as yet hasn't quite figured out what their loyalty program is. But we do know that Booking.com has their Genius loyalty program, which basically means that a guest, after having achieved a certain number of bookings, whether it's 5 or 15 bookings on Booking.com, their Genius level increases. And if the Genius level increases, they can access greater discounts with certain properties. Now, this is very useful, not actually for how it's intended, but because I want to filter out as many of the bad guests as possible. My worst experiences have been with Booking.com guests, both from communication, from platform, into just the intuitiveness of their platform, through to just the awareness, the common sense. Booking.com guests have been my biggest challenge. At the same time, have brought in nearly half my revenue. So there's no ways I can ignore the value that Booking.com guests bring in. But I need to be able to differentiate those from the riffraff who just seem to take it for a chance, especially because Booking.com does not have the same kind of guest accountability, a review process like Airbnb does. On Airbnb, we can review a guest and we can say, I would never recommend this guest to anyone else. And they left my place in a bad state. Whereas in Booking.com, we can't really do that. And it certainly doesn't make an impact on a future host to see the bad behavior of a guest. So I want to try and use as many filters as possible to do that. So what I do is in my pricing structure, let's say that I set my Airbnb pricing at 1,000 Rand. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the software that I use in the channel manager that on Booking.com, I want you to increase it to, let's say, 1,500 Rand. So therefore, it will appear as more expensive. But then in Booking.com, I'm going to subscribe to their Genius program, and I'm going to increase the level. It's the discount that I'm willing to give. So for, let's say, a Genius level 2, I can say I'm going to provide a 15% discount. That means that it might be 1,000 Rand here on Airbnb. It appears as 1,500 on Booking.com, but if you're a Genius level 2 and above, it's going to get cheaper and cheaper. And when it's stacked with all the other discounts, such as a mobile rate, in other words, if someone's on their mobile, they get an increased discount, and any other discounts I put in place, the prices come to the same. So at the end of the day, my ideal guest will pay the same on whichever platform you're at. But if you're a first timer at Booking.com, you're a chancer, maybe it is because you trashed a place and Booking.com threw you off the platform and you've had to start afresh, then you're not the kind of guest that I'm wanting. I'm wanting a guest who knows how to travel and has been around long enough that if there was certain issues, Booking.com would probably kick you off, or there would be some way of getting them away from the system. So I want a guest who's been traveling for between 10 and 15 times or even more. So I want those guests to have the biggest discount so that at the end of the day, their perceived discount is significant, but if someone is just a chancer, they're going to have to pay a significant amount more, which means they're unlikely to book my place. So that is a very simple model in which I can still earn a very similar income, but I have just kind of filtered out a wide range of the guests I don't want, especially those that have no track record, that are first-time guests, because they just create the biggest problem. So that is the genius level program. It's not really because I'm looking for loyalty. It's because I'm using that function to filter out those that I don't want. And remember that in Booking.com, your discounts often stack. So if you've got a mobile rate of 10% and I've got a genius level 2 or 15%, that's already 25% discount. So you've got to make sure that your leverage up from your original to your Booking.com is significant enough that when someone applies all those discounts, then you're not going to lose money. So you need to just be very careful and think carefully about that. The next one is actually I'm going to talk about is what I believe is the most important strategy to use in Airbnb and Booking.com. And that is, in the absence of value, people default to choosing price. In other words, if one apartment looks just like the one next door, they're going to go just on which is the cheaper one. So they're going to use price as the main strategy, which means you're going to have to really compete very, very hard to get the right strategy to compete on price alone. Luckily, in South Africa, we do not have a lot of themed approaches. And what I mean by that is that you have specifically themed your unit to stand out from the others, because we are increasingly getting, because of a huge supply, a large number of units that look the same, are professional now. They're using professional photographs. They're all looking good. That it's very difficult to differentiate which are the better ones with value. So in other parts of the world, people have cottoned on to the themed approach. They theme their units as Star Wars or as outdoors or as glamping, or perhaps as Mickey Mouse. You think of all those Airbnbs around the Disney World, they're all themed with Mickey Mouse, where the rooms are full of Disneyland characters, and the beds have shapes of all the Disneyland characters. So there's a very specific intent they put in there that's going to give someone an experience, because what we've realized is more and more short-term renters are not looking for a home away from home. They're looking for something different. They're wanting to create an experience that turns into a long-lasting memory. So we have to create something that differentiates that, and that is from a themed approach. Now, whether you just paint it bold with really striking colors that stand out on the listing, so straight away people see that this looks different, or whether you take a proper themed approach, this is going to create a way for you to differentiate and distinguish yourself from your competition. In my places, I've also written a whole article on that, and in my last 2 apartments, I specifically themed them different. The one was gemstones, so I've got hundreds of thousands of gemstones, raw cut, specific precious and semi-precious gemstones in cabinets that are all alarmed, but there's a very distinct theme to that. And in the other one, I've done it as shells, as a sea-themed approach, not just another beachside apartment, but we themed the lights and the wallpapers and the colors and all the shade, the light shades, all that was very specific. We even have cabinets of precious shells on display. Again, just giving people a different perspective. And we have heard again and again that guests chose our places because it stood out in the pictures and because they said that's a place that looks unique and that we want to go. So really take heart and take to heart that a themed approach, a way for you to differentiate yourself, is essential, because you'll increase your occupancy and you'll be able to charge more, because it's more difficult for them to compare your unit to the one down the road if yours looks so different that they don't know what is the right pricing to compare. So that's going to be also really, really important. The next one, of course, is scaling, because for many of us, we want to increase our profits, increase our units, or increase our asset base. So scaling is a strategy for us to use to achieve that. And one of the most important ways to do it is to create efficient systems, especially those with your cleaners and your check-in processes. We heavily automate all of our check-ins from digital locks, but more importantly, in this case, I'm referring to your team. At some point, you may move away from outsourcing your cleaners and your management team to an internal. You might employ people like I do. And in that case, your efficiency is going to result in a high degree of satisfaction for your guests. And of course, a lot of less headaches and less situations occurring because things slip through the cracks. And in this case, our cleaners get notifications straight away when bookings are done, when cleans are due. We rely heavily on online systems to manage our maintenance, to see if there's damage, to do prepaid electricity token distributions, all those kinds of things. It's essential for you to use strongly systemized and automated processes. Otherwise, you have so much back and forth in communication that with miscommunication, you've got mishaps, and therefore you're going to have mistakes, which are going to be costly. So those are the kinds of things which are really, really important for you to do and to ensure that your profits increase and, of course, your occupancy rates increase. So there are just some of the general things that I want to share with you, my personal tactics that I feel have significantly helped me generate really good returns over many years. And if people say, well, it's capped out now, there's too much supply, and with all the regulations coming down the line, well, I'm still very confident that I'm going to make money, and I'll deal with those things when it happens. So for now, take all of these insights to heart, implement them right away, because now is the time to differentiate, and I promise you, you'll come out better and make more money.